Peter Parker and Miles Morales. Spider-Man after Spider-Man. The death of Peter Parker in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics always makes me sad. It's hard to watch your favorite guy die. But what makes this specific Spider-Man death so important is that it gives birth to another Spider-Man. You see, days before Peter Parker dies, a young Brooklyn resident is bitten by another radioactive spider, Miles Morales. Of course, young Miles starts to realize that he's gained superpowers, and he doesn't want to be a superhero. He's just a 13-year-old boy who sees being Spider-Man for what it really is, swinging around the city and being smacked around by guys 10 times your size. What a smart assessment.
Don't make me have to hurt you!
Miles does not want to be Spider-Man until Peter Parker fucking dies. After hearing the news of Spider-Man's last stand, Miles rushes across the city and onto the scene. He keeps his distance, and he realizes he's too late to do anything, and he believes that Spider-Man's death is all his fault. Miles refused to use his powers in a way that could have helped his fellow man, deciding to try to stay a normal boy as opposed to being a big-time superhero. Miles even says himself that if he had used his powers the way he was supposed to, the second he'd gotten them, maybe he could have met Spider-Man. Maybe he could have saved him. Miles' inaction sows a deep guilt within him, a feeling very similar to the one that pushes Peter Parker to keep being Spider-Man. Peter Parker's death gives Miles something to struggle with, and puts Miles in a world so much different from the New York we typically explore. People are opposed to the idea of a new Spider-Man. Literally any time someone can accuse the new Spider-Man of being in bad taste, it happens. New Yorkers loved Spider-Man, and Miles has to prove that he can be just as great as the previous Spider-Man. He has to prove it to Peter Parker's loved ones, the superhero community who knew Spider-Man, and the villains who just want to put Spider-Man back in the ground. Miles has to wade through the things that made Peter who he is, but he has to be careful not to lose himself in all of it. Criticize the book all you want, call Miles a Peter clone. I don't care. This is still groundwork for an interesting take on Spider-Man. I loved reading the Miles Morales books when I was a kid, and I still enjoy reading them now. So I was just as happy to see 2018's Into the Spider-Verse make Miles even cooler. Not only are we given a Miles that has to struggle with the death of Peter Parker, we also get to see how the world changes after Spider-Man dies. Just like in the comic, there's so many small moments where you get to see many people grieving over the death of their hero, and you wonder how Miles Morales will make it out on top. I was getting a little blasted on Twitter for saying this Miles is comic accurate, but he really is. He's not 100%, because really, who is these days? But there are still so many bits from the original Miles story here. Miles makes it into Brooklyn Vision's Academy through a lottery. Miles is bit by a radioactive spider doing something he shouldn't with his uncle. Miles doesn't want to be Spider-Man. Miles witnesses the death of Spider-Man and doesn't intervene. The guilt of letting Spider-Man die lives within him. He dons a shitty Spider-Man costume, he does a team up with 616 Peter, and of course, his cat burglar uncle bites the bullet. Some of these things don't happen exactly the same way they do in the comics, but these moments did happen in some way within Miles' books, or at least the books he appeared in. What matters is that all the interesting stuff from Miles' story is still here. How Peter Parker's death affects him, how the city grieves Spider-Man's loss, and the death of his very own uncle. This is not someone loosely adapting Miles' origin and throwing his books to the side. This is a movie that knows Miles' story and shows you as much as it can while still fitting it in a Spider-Verse story. Now compare this Miles to his video game counterpart. This version of Miles Morales has it easy compared to all his other versions. Here, Peter's still alive, and even better, Miles gets to be Spider-Man. He gets to grow as Spider-Man with all the help he can get from Peter. There is no grieving New York, there is no fight for the respect of Spider-Man, because how hard can it really be when Peter's still alive to endorse you? Whether you like it or not, Peter dying gives Miles a great conflict to struggle with. And while it is really cool to see two Spider-Man fight together, it becomes less meaningful. And no, Peter going on vacation so Miles can have his own solo adventure doesn't compare to Peter being straight up dead. Peter leaving for 5 minutes so Miles can take up the mantle will never mean as much as Peter dying for Miles to take up the mantle. Less is more. Insomnia Miles lives in the world that Comic Miles wishes he does. A world where he could have been in the loop, could have fought side by side with the original Spider-Man, could have lived an easier life with guidance from his superior. But the truth is, when you're given everything you wish for, things aren't as interesting. Without conflict, there isn't as much of a story to tell. I mean, does anyone care for the plot of the Miles Morales game? Does anything happen in the story that's meaningful outside of it? Not really. Prowler doesn't even die. If there is one conflict for Insomnia Miles, it's that his dad's dead. But who fucking cares? Every superhero's parents are dead. We only know this guy because he dies in the first game, which is a Peter story, by the way. The focus isn't on Miles, which is one of the reasons I think Insomnia Miles is so much less interesting. Peter dying in the comics makes it easier for the story to focus on Miles by himself. Miles is reeling from the loss of a character we all love, and he must traverse a world full of people who are just as sad as we are about Spider-Man's death. But Insomnia Miles has to deal with the death of his father, a character we know from a couple of Peter's missions before he dies. Miles Morales is now just another superhero with a dead parent. That's the grief that motivates him, rather than the much more palpable sadness of Spider-Man dying. I don't know. I just find it less interesting this way. Peter Parker dying was what made Miles' story so unique. He was the phoenix rising from the ashes. He is the new Spider-Man. This would be like taking Miguel O'Hara out of the year 2099 and tweaking his origin so he can exist at the same time as Peter. Or making Spider-Girl entirely unrelated to Peter Parker so that you don't have to age Peter up and make him put a baby in MJ. This adaptation takes Miles and puts him in a world where he starts as a side character, gets his own video game, and then just devolves into the other Spider-Man. I'm not opposed to new takes on these characters, but I'd really like the new ideas to actually be interesting and engaging, not a plot that's saved by the fact that you get to navigate it with really fun combat and swinging. I'd rather see my goat die and give birth to another. To me, a character is not just who they are or what they do. It's about the things they struggle with and the world they live in. What sounds more interesting to you? A young boy with great power who lives in a city grieving the death of its greatest hero, one he's never sure he'll live up to? Or another young boy with a dead father figure who can easily get support from someone just like him? I'm sorry, he's just cooler the other way. If you're gonna adapt Miles, you're shooting yourself in the leg by not killing Peter. You lose that world-shaking moment that affects Miles and his world so deeply. You'd have to find a way to replace it, and with something more substantial than your average superhero parent death. If you like Miles Morales, and you really want to see more of this dead Peter shit, please read his original run. And go check out Spider-Man too. Anyway, are you tired of watching me make videos about stuff you don't care about? Would you rather see me finish my Spider-Man cartoon? Well, everything that's available for my Spider-Man cartoon is behind the channel membership. For as low as $3, you can join the channel membership and you can see as much of my Spider-Man cartoon that is finished. Not to mention, you get to see a couple of videos early. And of course, please think about using my Fortnite creator code, AmazingPSM. There's some cool stuff in the item shop right now. And if you really like Miles Morales, totally unrelated merch is up in the store for you, my very own merch shop. There's a bunch of other spider hoodies there if you're interested. All kinds of arthropods on hoodies you can get for yourself. Totally unrelated to the character I'm always making content about. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to animating my Spider-Man show. That's not a joke. I'm actually gonna get to work on it after recording this. Okay, bye!